Hey everybody, welcome back to the GOAZCATS.com football preview show. We are back again with another episode. A little bit different vibe this week, compared to last week. Obviously, Arizona was coming off that North Dakota State win during last week's show. This week, a little bit different, Troy. This is Matt Moreno, GOAZCATS.com senior editor, joined by Troy Hutchison, staff writer at GOAZCATS.com. And Troy, a little bit different vibe. There was a lot of optimism coming off that win over North Dakota State. People feeling like, okay, they did some things. That was obviously a good win for Arizona. They were the underdog going into that game, or the underdog going into the Cal game as well. But really looked like the underdog, by the end of that day. Some glaring kind of issues popping up again for Arizona. What were your biggest takeaways of that 49-31 loss to Cal at Cal's homecoming, which was not a big crowd. It wasn't, I think, an exciting game, but what was kind of your biggest takeaways from what we saw from Arizona in that 18-point loss to Cal?
Well, I knew it was going to be a blowout. I just thought it was going to be the other way around. Arizona looked like it got tired down on defense. The first half, they're able to hold Cal to 21 points. But in the second half, Cal outscored them 28-7. That's a product of Cal running for 354 yards on the ground. And Jaden Ott, I think he's still running. I think he stopped in Ontario somewhere at 274 yards rushing. But it's also Arizona's offense. They scored 24 points in the first half, and they really couldn't get going in the second half. And you just kind of saw them get away from what they were doing successfully and kind of fall in love with the pass. There's a couple situations where it was 3rd and 2, and you have an out shovel run to DJ Williams, and it stopped for a negative gain. They got a punt, and they were up by 3 at that point. They go on to score. It's a 10-point game. Who knows how that game goes? But I think Arizona got in its own way offensively at times, and Jim DeLora threw some picks, but you know what? He was just trying to get them back in the game. It's some of those picks where you're scrambling, and it's going to happen sometimes when you're trailing. And then defensively, they just had no answer. Absolutely none, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, I think when you look at this game, the offense doesn't feel like it's the issue. Yes, you had a couple interceptions from Jaden DeLora that Jedd Fisch kind of called out after in the post-game press conference and mentioned, you can't have those interceptions on, first and second down. You just can't live with those. If the game was closer, I think those are magnified. But just taking, a look at what the game is for what it is, Jaden DeLora throws for 401 yards. You can't ask him to do much more than that. He threw a couple touchdowns, threw the ball 45 times. They ran for 135, which is fine. They need to be doing better. That needs to improve. They don't have a good run offense right now, and that's a problem because you have so many talented players. That was supposed to be, we talked about throughout spring and through camp. That's the most, the deepest group on this team is you can go, 6 or 7 players deep, it feels like, with that running back group. And they're playing a few guys, but it just hasn't produced at the level that I think we all thought they would. And that's even after adding a guy like DJ Williams, who, adds a different element to that running back room. So a little bit, underwhelming kind of performance from the offense, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was clearly the defense. And you look at Cal, and they kind of just, the second play of the game, Jaden Ott takes it, I think 73 yards on that one, scores a touchdown, gets through everybody. And you go, they know what they're doing. They know what the game plan is. If I'm Cal, especially as that first quarter played out, you said, if I'm Cal, I said it, don't throw the ball. Like, why even bother throwing the ball at that point? Because they're getting whatever they wanted with Jaden Ott or whoever they put back there. But primarily Jaden Ott, who went for 274 yards in the game. Really whatever they wanted. He was getting first downs. He was kind of doing whatever he wanted. Ended up with an average of 14.4 yards per carry. If you're going to get that every time he touches the ball, just keep giving him the ball. So Cal kind of used the running game to open other things up. And that's kind of the issue with Arizona, is if you're going to be allowing that many rushing yards, you're going to have to give up kind of somewhere to help slow that down. And obviously you can load up the box, but then that leaves you susceptible, on the back end and in the secondary. And Cal doesn't have a fantastic offense outside of, Jaden Ott and the running game. But they look like it in the second half. And that was, I think, the issue, is that, Arizona had to dedicate so much to stopping the run, or at least trying to slow it down, that it leaves you open for some plays, down the field for the passing game. And, Jack Plummer exploited that. They really look good on offense in that second half. I think, if you're looking at this straight up, yes, the players are the players, but this to me felt like a coaching issue more than anything. Really kind of the first, I called it a dud by Johnny Nansen. I mean, I think there's been kind of some weaknesses and some holes in the defense, but overall, I feel like it's kind of lived up to what you expected. They're making plays, they're creating turnovers, but it felt like for the first time, Johnny Nansen kind of got out coached, and that's a problem. And I think he realizes that, and he mentioned that during the week that it's a lot of this is on him. And I was there at the game, and we spoke with Jedd Fisch after the game, and he alluded to it was the coaches have to be better as well, and it didn't feel like the standard, hey, I'm just going to take the blame for this loss, and our coaches are going to take the blame for this loss. It felt like a sincere, hey, the coaches need to be better too. And I think if you watch that game, you said, Bill Musgrave, who a lot of Cal fans hate. It's not even that they don't like they hate him. They hate his offense. They think it's boring. It didn't look like that last week, and that's an issue if you're Arizona, because Cal is not one of the premier teams in the Pac-12. Yes, they're winning games. They've had a nice start, but they're not a premier team right now in the Pac-12. They have to continue to show that. Maybe they can be that, and who knows what the rest of the season holds. But they're not in Oregon, they're not a USC, and you have those games coming up if you're Arizona. So you have to get this thing fixed. And so I thought that was a big issue. And really the only glaring issue was the defense and its inability to stop the run. And, you're facing a team this week. We'll get to, this game later on, but you're facing a team this week in Colorado that is terrible, but has done a lot of good things running the ball against Arizona. So, but that's the end of my kind of rant there, I guess, Troy. But what do you have?
No, I think, Bill Musgrave, he came over from, I think his last stop before Cal was with the Oakland Raiders at the time. They turned into the Vegas Raiders, obviously, but he had a pretty good offense there. I know Cal fans aren't too excited about his offense right now, and it's still a work in progress, but I think it was one of those cases where you saw a 15-plus year veteran head coach at one point in time, but mostly coordinator, take advantage of a first-year defensive coordinator, been through the battles and knows what he's going to do. And when he found a weakness, he exploited it. And Johnny Nansen didn't know how to cover it up, but that comes with being a first-year defensive coordinator. I think overall Arizona's defense has improved. It just got really exposed in the Cal game, and that's a problem because you have a lot of teams that are going to run the football coming up. I mean, you have a gauntlet of Utah, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, and they all run the football. So Arizona's got to really shore that up and figure a way to slow that down, or else it's going to be a long middle of the season for the Wildcats.
Well, and if there's one group on defense that I think anybody who watched the team during spring ball, during training camp was concerned about, it was the linebacker group. And to me, as I was watching that game, yes, they're finding holes, and the offensive line did a really good job for Cal of creating some space for Jaden Ott to run and the running backs to run. And that's against the defensive line. But to me, it wasn't a glaring defensive line issue. I think they're fine there. They have the players there for sure. They have the talent there. To me, when I watched that and you watched what was happening, I said, this is a linebacker problem. And it's interesting because I like Arizona's linebackers. Jerry Roberts does a lot, but they're very young elsewhere, and they don't necessarily have the great size to stop a big running team or a team that, is going to try and power through you. Yes, they showed it against North Dakota State, but they also didn't do a very good job of slowing down the run in that game either. They were just able to do enough in other areas to make up for that. But again, I like Jacob Manu. I think he's a very, very good player, undersized. I mean, I think this is where right now is where you're missing a guy like Malik Reed, who I don't even think made the trip to Berkeley. That would be your guy to kind of help plug up some holes. So what do you see as being the primary issue with this run defense right now with Arizona?
Yeah, I think outside of Jerry Roberts, it's a very young linebacking core. You alluded to that, and Colby Cage is another case in point of that. I know this is his second year in the program. Actually, I think third year in the program technically, but this is his first year truly starting at linebacker. Good cover guy, but growing as a run stopper. Jacob Manu brings really good energy, will hit guys downfield pretty hard, runs downhill. But again, his size is an issue right now. I don't think it will be later on in his career, but it's a lot of growing pains. And Malik Reed not making the trip and frankly just hasn't been on the field very much. That was the guy that everybody thought would be right next to Jerry Roberts. We saw him in the ASU game to end the season, had 9 tackles, looked pretty good, and looked good in spring and through parts of training camp. And he's kind of just disappeared within the shuffle. Don't know the situation of that, if that's, just a coaching thing or not, but they need to find somebody to step up when they have games like that, and Malik Reed could be the answer, but obviously he still has some things to work on, and they're trusting Jacob Manu and Colby Gage right now, who will be very talented linebackers one day, but are still going through growing pains.
Yeah, and the other issue I think to me that was like, oh, this is different. This feels different, and maybe why it kind of led to what happened was they were missing tackles. I believe according to PFF, they missed 15 tackles in the run game, which is the most all season. The most they've missed in a single game is 7. So they doubled that total and some. So, I mean, that was an issue. I think if you watched that game, you said, okay, the linebackers are not necessarily, doing their full job, but really across the board, they were having issues tackling, which hasn't been a problem. And I don't know what you do with that. I mean, I don't know if it's a focus problem. I don't know if the coaches know what the issue is, because again, they had been pretty good. It had really been one of the strong points of the defense was their ability to tackle. They've been kind of deficient in some other areas and have kind of bounced back and forth with some other, areas of the game where things have looked better and not so much the next week. But tackling has really been the thing that's been consistent throughout the whole season. And it just kind of disappeared in that game. And, sometimes you do have to credit the players on the other side and Jaden Ott and being able to, speed through there and, create some plays where he was escaping and getting out of tackles. And, it's one of those games where you can tip your hat to the other team if you're Arizona. But to me, that was a clear issue where like they just couldn't make tackles and they're missing tackles. And if that becomes a trend, that's a real problem because, like I said, that was one of the things they've been doing well.
And one of the things I think that leads to that, and we've talked about all week, is being in position. And that's part of fundamentals, not only being in the right form, tackling, getting low, because you want to get lower than your offensive player, but you also need to be able to be in the right position or else you're going to try to make side tackles, and that leads to missed tackles.
All right. So maybe we're done talking about this one. I think Arizona fans are kind of over talking about this one. I know Arizona's players and coaches are definitely getting to the point in the week where they're going to be over talking about this one. But moving on to this Colorado game, a lot of Arizona fans, at least on our boards and kind of gauging the pulse out there, social media wise, not a ton of confidence in this game right now. And everyone's kind of saying, oh, is this going to be this year's NAU? Where it's just a team you should beat. You should have no issue going up against. Arizona's going in as a double-digit favorite. You should win this game. There's no excuse for losing this game. Colorado is not even just bad. Like, they're historically bad. They're a terrible football team. Probably worse than last year's Arizona team, if we're all being honest. And
it might be the worst team since Washington.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad. And so, but it can be dangerous to go up against a team like that who feels like they have nothing to lose. They're probably looking at this week going, this is the one game they have a shot to win this season if there's a couple on the schedule. So they're going to be excited. Again, as I mentioned, they've done some good things against Arizona, in the running game in particular, where they've had some big rushing performances against Arizona, which, matches up with one of Arizona's weak spots, defensively. So it's an interesting matchup. What do you make of this week and how do you view kind of this thing overall as Arizona heads into, its next home game?
I think it's a game that Arizona has to keep an eye on. Although Colorado is winless and you should go into this saying, okay, we're going to win by 20 plus points. They've beaten you twice, and last year they beat you 34-0. So Colorado's coaching staff is going to go into this game saying, hey, this is a team you beat 34-0 last season. You should be able to win this game. I know they're a different team, but they're going to go in with confidence in this game. And Arizona right now, their main thing is we need to stop the run, and that's where Colorado's a little bit successful at. They're missing Fontenot right now, who rushed all over Arizona last season, but they have some guys that are averaging 4.4 yards a rush, 5.8 yards a rush. So they have some guys that can get the job done. But if I'm Arizona, you need to make this a statement. Because if this game's close or you lose it, either one of those two, I think there's going to be some panic set in by the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, you can't lose this game. It is very similar to the NAU game last year. And if you're Arizona, you're just trying to, show that you're making signs of progress. I know Jedd Fisch kind of came back to one of his favorite topics, which is just the process. And this is building blocks. And he wasn't overly angry about, last week's game, or at least it didn't show, in the post-game press conference. And I think it would have if he was truly, angry about that loss. I think he realizes, hey, this team is going to have to take its lumps and it's not where it needs to be. And I don't think it was a classic kind of letdown, where they get they get a win and they're just kind of riding too high and have too much confidence. They just didn't play well. And so you can't have 2 weeks like that in a row because that's becoming a trend. And then you're going in the wrong direction, heading into a little bit of a difficult part. Well, not even a little bit, the difficult part of the schedule coming up here soon. And so this is kind of the area where you're trying to get some wins if you're trying to be bowl eligible. I know a couple of weeks ago we were talking about, hey, they could be, 4-1 by this point after this Colorado game. And you're talking about, a really nice season. And now you're not having that same conversation. And so just because of one game. So you don't want to fall behind in this league and, go under 500 and have that going on. But especially against this team, but it's not a great, as bad as Colorado is, it's not a great matchup for Arizona considering what they don't do well. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out. But as they kind of move forward and you look at this game, who are maybe a few players that you're going to have your eye on that are going to be important for Arizona to pull out a win?
Yeah, I think number one is going to be Jayden de Laura. Can you prevent turnovers? He's had a few issues with turnovers this year, 6 turnovers with 8 touchdown passes. I believe there is also a fumble by Dorian Senior. So overall 7 for the offense. Don't give Colorado a chance to flip the field and score an easy touchdown. You got to protect the ball. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to be looking at Jacob Manu. Last week was a pretty bad week for the linebacking group. I expect to see Jacob Manu and Colby Cage in there a lot. So it's kind of like a dual watch there and just see how they tackle and wrap up, because I think Colorado is going to try to run to their side of the football and kind of stay away from Jerry Roberts and force the young linebackers to make plays. And if they can be in the right position and stop the run, Arizona should be good. And then lastly, we've been waiting this whole entire time for a real breakout game from the running backs. We've seen 88-yard performances, 70-yard performances, but I think this is going to be the Michael Wiley game. Kind of a guy that gets overlooked, although he has, I believe, 3 touchdowns this season already. Last year, he scored 2. He's been pretty consistent for us for Arizona. I think he needs to get over 100 yards in this game and kind of establish the run. And we saw him get close to that before Arizona went away from the run. I think this is the game where he goes for 130, 140 yards with a couple touchdowns and really has a breakout performance.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 players, and it would mostly be defense at this point for me. I think the offense is going to be just fine. I think they know what the game plan is, and I think they'll do fine on that side. But to me, it's the more concerning side, as we've been talking about, is the defense. And so to me, it's one of those games where you say, look at your leaders. And that starts with Jerry Roberts. He obviously talked this week and answered all the questions about, what went wrong with the defense. I think he's going to be an important part of what Arizona has to do defensively. You mentioned the other linebackers, but he needs to have a better game himself personally, make some improvements, especially in the tackling area. And then Hunter Echols. I think this will be a nice game for him to kind of have a breakout performance and really, he showed some things early on in the season, has made some strides and done a lot more than, he was doing at USC during his, with a bigger opportunity at Arizona. But this could be one of those games where you get everyone to rally around you. Him and Jalen Harris, I think, are going to be key in this game and, really try and help, prevent what happened, last week and really slow down that running game and keep Colorado in check and keep it a low scoring game on their end. To allow the offense to kind of do its thing. But maybe give me a couple things as well before we kind of wrap up here that you're going to be looking at that are going to be key. Obviously, let's maybe say outside of run defense. What are a couple other things that are going to have to be important for Arizona to pull out a win this week?
Yeah, I think offensively, if there's one thing Arizona hasn't been good at this season besides turnovers, is their third down offense. They've had games where they've gone 4 for 12, 5 for 13. They haven't had that 10 for 12. That 8 for 10 game yet. They haven't been able to extend drives significantly. And you want to keep your defense off the field and kind of put pressure on the other team's defense. So Arizona needs to be able to stay on the field. And I'm not saying go perfect, 11 for 11, 12 for 12, but a nice 7 for 11, a nice 8 for 12. That would be huge for Arizona's defense. And it's huge for the offense. It extends drives and keeps the pressure on the other team. So I think that's number one. Number two is going to be getting to the quarterback. They've been good at that this season, but against Cal, they weren't very good at that. They didn't get to the quarterback once for a sack. if you're able to get Colorado in those 3rd and long situations, you're going to take pressure off of your defense, because I'm sure they're going to run on 1st down. But let's say they only gain 2 yards and it's 2nd and 8, they're going to try some play action. If you're able to get to the quarterback and make it a 3rd and long situation, that takes a lot of pressure off of your defense in terms of the run defense, and puts pressure on your secondary, which is one of the best in the country and one of the best in the Pac-12. I think that's good for Arizona. I think it bodes well for them. So being able to keep pressure off of your run defense by getting to the quarterback and letting your secondary take over is going to be huge.
A quarterback, I might add, who is a freshman making his 2nd start, his 1st road start. Probably good to get after him. But let's move on to the final segment here, our predictions. Vegas Insider, I'm looking at it right now, has it at 56.5 for the over-under, and Arizona as a 17.5 point favorite. Score prediction, Troy, how do you see this one playing out?
I think they cover. I think it's going to be kind of close in the first half. First quarter, I think it's going to be kind of like a 14-7 game, and fans are going to get worried a little bit. But I think Arizona opens things up in the 2nd quarter, and they run away with this game 42-17, kind of blow out Colorado. And the run defense does give up its yards, but I think offensively Arizona is just way too much for Colorado, and they're going to create some turnovers. So they win this one 42-17.
That's I like that one. I'm going something similar. I think it'll be close for a time, and then eventually just the better team will win out. And, you see that across college football, a lot. You see that across high school football a lot, where, a team can hang around and, stick in there for a quarter or two, and then eventually the better team ends up prevailing. I think that's going to be a similar scenario this week. I do think Arizona's going to cover. Colorado is so bad, and everyone knows it. Carl Durrell is already, having to answer questions about, are players going to be leaving? What's your situation looking like, with the roster? Are you going to redshirt guys because the season is essentially kind of lost after 4 games? They're in a lot of turmoil, and they feel a lot like Arizona last year. Again, maybe even worse. They just lost so much of the talent. Any good player that they had is gone now because he decided to enter the transfer portal. And not only does he do that, but he goes to another, Pac-12 school. I mean, they had so many players leave to other Pac-12 schools, and it's a tough situation to be in. Like I mentioned, a true freshman quarterback in his 1st start on the road, 2nd start overall. As poorly as Arizona played, and as clear as the game plan would seem for Colorado, I don't think they have the players to execute it and do it well enough to beat Arizona. I think Arizona's offense is going to continue to have success. So I'm going Arizona 38-13 in this game. I don't trust Colorado in the least bit. Much like I didn't trust Arizona last year. And, they can't score. I mean, they have one of the worst scoring offenses, in the country. I think they're averaging something like 11.8 points per game so far through the first 4 games. It doesn't add up to being any good. And so that's why I have them sticking around the 13-point mark. Arizona 38-13. That's the way I'm going. We'll see what happens. We've been okay on our predictions this year, Troy. Been relatively close. So we'll see what happens. But we appreciate you listening as always, everybody. And we'll talk to you guys next time.